Donald Trump Jr. appeared on the War Room podcast with Steve Bannon. And get ready, this one was a doozy. My goodness. So many dishonest talking points are crammed into the clip you're about to watch. So I try to jot down all of them so I could go through afterwards one by one. But from both Steve Bannon and Don Jr., I will just say, notice the desperation coming from Don Jr. in the arguments he makes. The fact that years later, they've been completely unable to bring forward a shred of evidence that the election of Joe Biden was not anything other than free, fair, legitimate, and secure. And that's so embarrassing for them. They now have to resort to pretty desperate and incoherent arguments, as you're about to watch. Also, I know I've titled a lot of videos something to this effect when it comes to Don Jr., but it's always the description that just strikes me when I see him speak. He's lost all of his marbles. They're all gone. Bye-bye. Here it is.
Harry Enton, CNN's pollster, saying, hey, 2/3 and oftentimes 75% of the Republican Party, and I think it's now 40% of the American people, and I think in independents is almost 50%, believe Joe Biden's illegitimate. What do you make? I mean, Lincoln, even when we fought a civil war, that requested legitimate. Go ahead. Tell me what. Is Joe Biden illegitimate president of the United States?
He can't get through a sentence. He can't do anything. They hid him in a basement. They weaponized everything they possibly could to rig an election, to put a puppet in charge. And make no mistake, Steve, I think Joe's been very effective for the radical Democrats, the people who are actually in charge, because he'll sign anything. Obama would have loved to have done so many of the things that Joe Biden is doing, whether it's the open borders or just basically the America Last policies that are destroying our economy and our hegemony across the world. He'd have done that, but he was not willing to risk his legacy, his future, the $20 million home on Martha's Vineyard and the $1 million speaking fees. He wouldn't do that, but they're more than happy to throw Joe Biden under the bus, knowing that this is a shell of a man, a shell of a human. He's simply a puppet doing the bidding of whoever the radicals that are in charge. Of course it was rigged. Does anyone actually believe, can someone tell me honestly with a straight face that Joe Biden, he lost 18 of 19 bellwethers, but magically, Steve, way overperformed Barack Obama in 2008 in Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia? Does anyone actually believe that happened? If you do, you're an imbecile.
Okay, I'm going to get to the book, Winning Team Publishing, and the new MAGA deal in a second, but got to ask you right now, what should this audience, what should the Warren Posse, MAGA, the deplorables, America First, what is the number one thing we should do to rally behind your dad?
Listen, I think we do have to unify. We have to bring back common sense to these things. We have to be unafraid of speaking out.
So a lot to respond to there. We'll go through it one by one. First, I'll address the declaration from Don Jr. of, if you believe the election was legitimate, then you're an imbecile. Count me in, Don. Count me in. Proud imbecile who actually cares about evidence and doesn't base my beliefs on our entire electoral system on my fifis. Then the whole argument starts off and is premised on the discussion about the number of people who believe the election of Joe Biden was illegitimate, which is built on a foundation of an argument that is one of the most dishonest arguments and illogical arguments we hear in American politics, which is essentially this. I, as someone speaking from the perspective of Steve Bannon, Don Jr., Trump, Marjorie Greene, whoever, have worked for years to engage in a propaganda effort to convince Americans that the election was illegitimate. Now, when you ask me, how do I know it was illegitimate? I point to the fact that the people I've convinced of that think that. I'm convincing people of something, then pointing to the fact that I've convinced people of that thing as justification for convincing them of that thing. Whoa. Can short circuit your brain right there, which seems like a lot of brains are short circuiting in MAGA. And that's the argument. We heard Marjorie Greene make it. She said, I believe the election was stolen. You know why? You know why that's okay? Because a lot of Americans believe it. Because you and all of your cohort have convinced them of it. That doesn't manifest any new evidence just because people start buying something that's fake. For a long time, a lot of the people who existed thought the earth was flat. So doesn't change the fact of the matter. He does mention civil war. He's referencing it within the context of saying even Abraham Lincoln wasn't perceived to be an illegitimate president. He had to fight a civil war. Just, first of all, do we even have polling on when Abraham Lincoln was president and the perception of his legitimacy as president? I don't think so. But also, anytime civil war comes out of Bannon's mouth, however it comes out, dangerous because of his track record with rhetoric to that effect. We'll get back to the Biden can't get through a sentence talking point a little later because I want to play a clip on that. But first, the next thing that Don Jr. says is they weaponized everything. They weaponized everything against Trump to steal the election. Is he referring to Democrats using their entire time in the majority in the House investigating and engaging in a political stunt effort to attack Trump politically and to smear him based on completely unsubstantiated allegations that in part came from an informant that was indicted for fabricating the whole story all along and getting the information from Russian intelligence as a misinformation operation to hurt Trump politically? Oh, wait. I'm describing Republicans, aren't I? Yeah, I am. Whoops. That's what Republicans have been doing. If you want to talk about weaponization of government, the weaponization of the Republican House majority's positions of power to go after Biden politically has been remarkably horrible. And it's concluded in, or it's about to, utter humiliation. I mean, nothing came of this investigation. But like with the election, they have been able to convince a lot of Americans of something that just is not true. Biden being corrupt again, when that's just not the case. Then he touches on talking point that drives me bonkers, which is that Joe Biden has been governing as a radical left Democrat. He says Biden's been effective for the radical Democrats. And he references the open border and America Last policies of Biden, I guess. Now, the open border talking point, we've gone through that for years now, not accurate, and also especially outrageous for him to bring that up when his father lobbied against and got MAGA Republicans to kill a piece of legislation that was written by a super conservative Senator James Langford, supported by the Border Patrol Union. Historic action on the border would have helped to address a lot of the very issues that are taking place at the southern border. And MAGA Republicans at the direction of Donald Trump killed that deal. And let me give you an example of one of the things that is coming of the fact that that legislation did not get through, something Biden was fighting on behalf of. There are fentanyl scanners, state of the art, that would help to detect fentanyl that people are trying to smuggle across the southern border through legal ports of entry. It's important to note that's where the majority of fentanyl gets through. So these scanners help to detect it, and we could prevent more fentanyl from getting across the border. And the scanners are there, ready to be installed, but they don't have the resources to install the scanners because they haven't been allocated such funding. That would have been allocated in this deal. So more fentanyl's getting into the country, something Trump and MAGA Republicans say they care about because of the obstruction of Trump and MAGA Republicans. Don Jr.'s dad is responsible for that. So more people are being hurt because of that. So outrageous to bring up open border as proof of Biden's extreme policy record because of what I just mentioned and more. Then America Last policies. Can somebody tell me, Don Jr., please explain what's extreme about Joe Biden's policy record? Because we just debunked your favorite, which is the border. What else? Is it extreme? Is it radical? Is it horrible that Joe Biden has overseen historic economic recovery post-pandemic and related crises? Total mayhem taking place when Biden gets into office. Trump mishandling it all. Crises on all fronts, social, public health, economic. Biden gets in and again stuns the world, outpaces comparable economies in our recovery, and now we're in a really strong place economically with more that we want to see happen, of course. Crime plummeting under Joe Biden after the pandemic era spike. And then legislative victories out the wazoo. whether it be the American Rescue Plan to help to uplift us out of that crisis, or the historic investment in infrastructure, largest since the Eisenhower Highway Program, or historic large investment in history in green energy, cheaper for consumers, better for the planet, expansions of ACA, expansions of healthcare for veterans, lowering of prescription drug costs, historic actions to strengthen unions, investments in American manufacturing, helping to stimulate the economy as we've seen it charging forward in a really strong manner. Are those things extreme? Are you saying, Don, you want seniors' prescription drug costs to be higher? I guess you can tell them that, but I sure don't want that, because that's the policy record that you're referencing when you say it's America last and extreme. Then he brings up that Joe Biden outperformed Barack Obama, meaning he got more votes than Barack Obama. True. And he references that as proof of just, it had to be illegitimate then. Have you ever stopped to think about why it might be that Joe Biden got more votes than any candidate in American history? In part because our population's larger. That just generally over time will affect a little bit. But the reason why right now, based on recent elections, Biden got so many votes, I think he has a really incredible policy platform. I think he was a strong candidate, and he's proven to govern more effectively than I think most people even expected who were following this very closely. But I'm willing to concede a lot of the reason for the historic turnout in favor of Biden was turnout against Donald Trump. Why? Because of that crisis I mentioned. When it feels like everything's falling apart, and this is what you try to lie about when you say, were you better 4 years ago than you are now? Or are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? I flip those every single time. And you're trying to say that people were better off 4 years ago. We were in the middle of a crisis. The pandemic was raging, or it was sort of, revving up, and then would eventually take more than 1 million lives. And people were so outraged and upset with having to watch a president who was not taking it seriously enough, who was a complete buffoon, who did not know how to govern like an adult, and wanted someone to replace him who could do those things better, who could govern effectively, who could get us out of that crisis. And so if you would do a little bit of introspection, it's actually not the point that you think it is. You're pointing out that Joe Biden was able to outperform a relatively popular Democratic president, Barack Obama, because of the sheer rage in America against our president at the time, Donald Trump, who was failing on all fronts to protect us and to help us and to govern us out of this horrible pandemic. So, not the point that you think that it is. All right, Biden can't get through a sentence. Let's address that now. Here is a little reminder of a couple things. Take a look.
I know the American story. Again and again, I've seen the contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of our nation. Between those who want to pull America back to the past and those who want to move America into the future. The issue facing our nation isn't how old we are, it's how old are our ideas. Hate, anger, revenge, retribution are the oldest of ideas. I see a future where defending democracy, you don't diminish it. I see a future where we restore the right to choose and protect our freedoms, where the middle class finally has a fair shot, and the wealthy have to pay their fair share in taxes. I see a future where we save the planet from the climate crisis and our country from gun violence. Above all, I see a future for all Americans. I see a country for all Americans. And I will always be president for all Americans. So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America.
And welcome to Hannity. We start tonight with a Fox News alert. Tonight, President Joe Biden laid out his radical wish list for America. His speech was so hyped up, it was bizarre.
So you saw in that second clip, Sean Hannity saying Biden was too energetic. Now he's upset because he was too pumped up, passionate, and jacked up was the term that Sean Hannity used. Now listen, that speech was really good. And also, it's absolutely the case that Biden has a gaffes. But you know what? I'll take those 7 days a week if it means it comes along with the historic policy record and the effective governance that we've seen from Joe Biden. Genuinely. Gaffes and governing, baby. That's my... Just thought of that. It's not too shabby. Gaffes and governing. Biden 2024. I guess I shouldn't go any further. Let's leave it there. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click the alert bell. Click the like button. And if you want to get the daily bonus show, lukebeasleyshow.com/membership. Also, you want to watch my interview with Don Lemon, you can click right there.